Hi, this is Dan Ladd. I'm one of the hosts of Niigaan and the Lone Ranger. This week, we're talking about Portage and Main. And if the contents of my inbox are any indication, strap in, folks. It's going to be a bumpy ride.
The Winnipeg Free Press proudly presents, in partnership with CJNU 93.7 FM, Niigaan and the Lone Ranger. Here are your hosts, Niigaan Sinclair and Dan the Lone Ranger Lett.
Welcome, everybody. We are hosting another fantastic channel discussion in this week's podcast episode. The topic is Portage and Main, so get your cranky pants out. You know, I don't know of a subject that makes Winnipeggers more cranky in one way or the other.
Ryan Bowman teed this one up for us a few weeks back.
Yeah, like he gave us a really nice bit of news off the plus the lament about how he got outmaneuvered on the plebiscite, and it was quite a frank admission that he screwed up, on it. So I thought, boy, being out of public office really frees up to say what you really mean. Joining me today, Jaya, who is from. She's the executive director of Storefront, Manitoba, one of my favorite organizations in the world. It's planners, urbanists, architects, mostly architects, and they do a ton of fantastic events all year long, including the fantastic Table for 1,200 now. Yeah, and the big outdoor dinner in secret location. Lots of public education. Again, one of my favorite groups, worked with them for years. And Brent Bellamy, who is creative director at Number 10 Architectural Group, and noted, Free Press columnist, so fellow columnist, and noted open up the damn intersection.
The Free Press labeled me the Portage and Main man.
The Portage and Main man,
on the
that's
front
right.
page.
Yeah, you can't see it, but there's a little copy right there, right beside it. And joining us electronically is the Niigaan and the Lone Ranger resident diva and world traveler. Once again, coming to us from an undisclosed location is the one and only Niigaan Sinclair.
I'm actually coming to you live from the belly of the beast, as it were, in Toronto, having just watched the Toronto streets die in sadness over the game, the Leafs losing in Game 5.
Moving on quickly. Okay, so the this week's podcast is riffing off the Portage and Main revitalization study, which we had been promised a document from the city to spur more public consultation and idea sharing. And I'm interested to hear what the panelists have to say. I was actually kind of surprised at what this was, because it, obviously they decided, like a kid in a swimming pool, they were going to do a cannonball and sort of see where the ripples. Jay, why don't you tell me, were you surprised at the direction the report took? Because it had a lot of crazy ideas in it.
I think more than anything, it's just exciting that we're talking about this again, that it's in public consciousness, that it's trending on Twitter. How often does Winnipeg manage that? I think some of the ideas are maybe a little bit crazy, but I think there's some really concrete proposals too that'll just spark the discussion and get people talking, and that's really exciting.
Yeah, so, years ago with Storefront, we actually hosted an event at the Free Press News Cafe, which was kind of a soft design competition. Come up with your boldest and craziest ideas for Portage and Main. And so there's an echo of that in this report. There were 4 gigantic observation towers. There was a suspended deck over the intersection for park and pedestrian travel. And then, some more practical ideas just about types of streetscaping that could be used, and different types of ways of keeping pedestrians out of the intersection. Because the report, Brent, does not anticipate a return of pedestrians to the intersection. It seems with all the bold ideas, it seemed kind of counterproductive to just sort of say, oh yeah, and we're not going to let anybody cross at grade. So
it's like they're trying to solve a problem without using this solution. And I really felt for the design team because they're challenged with bringing people back to the intersection. They're challenged with making it more accessible. They're challenged with making it safer. And the cheap and easy way to do that is to bring people back to the intersection by just letting them naturally use it in their day-to-day lives. But to not do, because they have to maintain the barricades, they're trying to create really almost an amusement park type feel to attract people there. And I think as long as there's this sort of dichotomy of how do we bring people there while at the same time repelling them with barricades, I think it's a really difficult challenge to solve. And I really felt for the design team. And you could see they were literally using a cannon to just shoot out ideas into the sky and see what lands.
I did a little experiment this week. And what I did is I posted on my social media the T name, which will never be named, the platform anymore. I posted a bunch of pictures that were being circulated around what Portage and Main looked like when, 50 years ago. And it is amazing the nostalgia that the people have over this intersection and having been able to cross it. Why do you think there's such this nostalgia, this desire to try to open up an intersection which for years has become really the epitome of much of the culture of the downtown?
I was really struck by when I opened up that link and it revealed the design ideas. What I was struck with most was how important Portage and Main is to us. That we would go to all this effort to have these huge ideas to try to bring it back, even though it's been hidden for almost 50 years from us behind concrete crash walls. It still holds a place in our heart that is so dear to us that we're willing to go to this trouble to do it. We wouldn't do this for any other intersection. And it goes right back to honestly, it's literally thousands of years embedded into our culture as people.
Crossroads, meeting places.
The crossroads, it was where the two trails met. It was the first, settlers came there. It was, a meeting place for First Nations because it was the high point coming away from the river. It's embedded into our souls. And I think even being hidden for 50 years, we still connect to it. It's where we mourn. It's where we celebrate. It's where we protest. We have other places. We could go to the Forks. We could go to True North. We could go to other places. We still go to Portage and Main. And I was really struck by the gymnastics we're going to go through to try to make it a great place because it means so much to us. And there's such an irony that we voted to a few seconds longer in our car wasn't worth trading for a better place, even though that place is clearly really important to us.
Jaya, why do you think it's also a point of fixation a little bit to the design and architecture community? I mean, it really is, it's a talker, right? Like it's a conversation starter. And, when you look back at, and I will be next week, I'll be republishing some of the images from the design competition that we held, is like it just seems to prime the creative pump a little bit. Why is it because of what Brent said, or is there some other aspect of the surrounding buildings, the streetscape, something that really attracts people from a design perspective?
It's kind of our public square, so it brings everyone there. It's a crossroads. It's a point of connection. It's the heart of our city. It's rallies and protests of every type going back to the 1919 strike, but continuing to this year. And so I think designers recognize the potential for that site to serve as a point of connection and to animate the city and really bring people out and feel the life of the city.
So animate the city. I'm going to come back to that in a minute. Niigaan, I'm wondering, I wrote a column about it, and you posted some photos. So before I tell people about the reaction I got, what kind of reaction did you get just by posting those photos?
Well, people really wanted to talk a lot about their relationship relationships and the families that they had in the downtown core. But there's one other story that I think is was brought up is there's a lot of ceremonies that are provided downtown or that are happening downtown, and there's been a movement for sort of green space, and the kind of overwhelmingness of the concrete were probably the most markedly part of what people were talking about. The fact that all of this concrete really creates an impression of downtown, and it's quite icy, it's quite cold. And if we think about the history of that area, the fact that from Portage and Main all the way down to Broadway in Maine was an indigenous city. There was an indigenous permanent site of 4,000 to 14,000 people in the summertime. It was a place of great life, and the creeks that were also there. So I think there's this sort of nostalgia also for green space in the downtown too.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think, to tell you the truth, that's largely why I was drawn. I mean, 10 or so years ago when we did the Storefront Manitoba competition, there were similar designs that put things above or over the intersection. And I think, what I have trouble getting away from is, like, to me, that those are ideas that do animate the intersection. So I would prefer that people were allowed to cross at grade. I think the entire debate about not allowing people to cross on the street is so disingenuous and dishonest. It's not the biggest intersection downtown. No. It's not the busiest intersection downtown. If you were going to argue that crossing at grade was so destructive to traffic patterns, you wouldn't let people cross at Broadway and Memorial, the biggest intersection downtown. That's busier than Portage and Main. But I think that, like, what captured my imagination a little bit about this was, and not, like, I think in addition to whatever they could do in fantastical design, like, let people cross at grade. Just let them cross, But, if there was an opportunity to do something more, like, I just came back from London, and Toronto. I had a visit to Toronto. And it's remarkable the number of things that those cities entail that have no more practical application than just cool. Mm-hmm. It's cool, it's design, and it draws people. From a practical point of view, let people cross at grade. Like, it's not a big deal. It just isn't a big deal. But I also worry that they're just, based on the way retail is developed around there, the way, the buildings around there now are not pedestrian friendly in and of themselves. There's very few access points to the buildings. There's no ground floor retail. There's no plans for it. There's a couple of spots that you might consider to be plaza-like, but not very big.
That's what happens when you have no people.
No, I agree. But I also think that, so returning the at-grade crossings doesn't, to me, fully realize the value of the asset, which is, I do think it needs something more.
I totally agree.
So what? Holy cow. Because, like, mostly Brent and I have, for years now, politely disagreed. Like, we're not really in disagreement, although, like, he kind of poo-pooed the idea of the Sky Garden.
The floating donut?
The floating donut or whatever.
Elevators to nowhere.
So, I don't know, like, Jaya, is there room for at-grade crossing and something more? Like, is there an argument for that?
I obviously support design and what it adds, and whether it be art or taking some other form. But I think adding an element of beauty that inspires people is an important element of redeveloping the space.
Yeah. So, okay, Mr. Sky Donut. So if we were, like, are those, like, but is above, like, taking use of the development space above the intersection, is that really, does it defeat the main goal of reopening the intersection? Is there, because I'll tell you, my readers don't think it's unbelievable, the reaction, but I'll get to that in a minute. But is above, is up a possibility of any kind?
I mean, I don't really see, if underground is no good, why above ground would be any different, other than it's cooler for sure.
Yeah.
And I'm 100% in for big ideas. I love big ideas. I love the idea of having something really special at Portage and Main. It would drive me crazy for eternity, knowing that the reason we did whatever we do was
To avoid.
to avoid actually answering the problem. You know, like, to me, that's floating donut would forever be a monument to our slavish addiction to the vehicle. And it would always say to us, more than the crash walls.
Yeah.
Like, the crash walls kind of say, we only want cars here, not people. Imagine a giant donut that says to the entire world, we couldn't just accept letting people cross the street, and we had to go to all this trouble to try to solve that problem. To me, it would be a monument for the generations that says we are slaves to the vehicle, and that would drive me crazy. But I definitely want big answers.
Both maybe, like, but
for sure.
But as long.
But I don't think any kind of attraction could be successful as long as you're also trying to repel people.
Well, the fact is that, out of the, 40-some businesses, about 95% of them want it open. They want the pedestrian walkway. They want to have access to a flow that goes something other than the underground. And then we haven't even gotten to the issues of the building concerns as well. If 95% of the businesses in the area, which is arguably what the argument is to close off the intersection, then wouldn't that just be enough?
Astoundingly, the interests and desires of the people who own the buildings around the intersection, who carry a lot of the financial strain of maintaining the underground components, they want it reopened.
And it's not just the business owners. If you look at, like, the famous graphic, the results of the vote, it was a donut. There was a big red dot in the middle. People who interact with that space want it open. People who ride transit want it open. People who come downtown want it open. It was closed because of people who don't really interact with the space. And so I absolutely agree with you. The fact that everyone who has a actual stake in the place wanting it open should be enough, but here we are.
Or they interact with the space for very short periods of time as opposed to dwelling in the space.
Yeah, I mean, it is like, I've actually had some like great moments at that intersection. One of them was definitely the dinner for 1200 that was at Portage and Main, and it kind of like the table for 1200 extended all the way down Roaring. It was extraordinary, but the best seats in the house were the ones that bled towards the intersection and filled up that little plaza in front of the Richardson building. I mean, it was just, and I was lucky enough to sit there, and it was magnificent. I mean, it was summer, but it was magnificent. So let's talk about Winnipeg. Shall we? Should we talk frankly about Winnipeg and Winnipeggers?
Go Jets, go.
Yeah, go. Yeah. Next season. So
careful, folks. Careful.
Yeah. So the great Jim August. I mean, I call it because he was one of the original guys I hooked up with. Jim August was pioneer of the Forks Renewal Corporation, Center Venture, and also the Core Area Initiative. I mean, going way back. And I remember having a meeting with Jim August. This probably was 1990. And saying, like, because I am from Toronto, and listeners will forgive me for that, I hope. But there is something about the lack of ambition of this city when it comes to challenges like this. It's always seemed to me to be so curious. So I said to him, tell me something, like, Winnipeg has had some boom periods, right? Like some real boom period, and not so long ago. How come we don't have skyscrapers? Like the buildings we have at Portage and Main are pretty modest, and there's only two of them really at that point. And he said, Dan, further, I asked him, like, could it be the geology? The clay, the high water table, all that stuff. And he goes, Dan, let me tell you, in Winnipeg, we don't build tall buildings because we don't like to be that high up off the ground. So, there is an element of fundamental truth in what he said, and other leaders of the community have said the same. Brian Bowman's kind of said it to me, Gary Dewar, Susan Thompson, others have said, whoa, slow your roll, buddy. Like not too high, not too fast. Like, are we just like kind of immune or alert? No, the word is allergic. Are we allergic to big and bold ideas?
I think
speak freely. There's only like 3 people listening, so no, there's more than 3 people listening. But speak freely. Yeah.
I always say if I ever run for mayor, I will never, but if I did, my first platform would be to give every resident $1,000 on the promise that they go somewhere else for a week and see what the big world is like. Because we treat Portage and Main as if it's some kind of alien that has landed from space and has never been dealt with anywhere else in the world. It has, whatever we do is some unique solution, but every city has a big intersection and they all walk across. We have other big intersections, like say in Winnipeg, and we all walk across it. So we do have this fear of, it's like almost a skepticism of big ideas. The Human Rights Museum was a perfect example of that. Somebody was trying to do something really bold and it meant nothing but opposition all the way along. And there is this sort of fear, apprehension towards, grabbing the brass ring. And I don't know what it is. There's sort of a defeatist. Maybe it was because we peaked in 1914 and we've had 110 years of, sliding down the hill since then. Maybe it's in our psyche to be self-defeating, but it's definitely something that I would love to beat out of us.
Yeah. Jay, it is tough for people in architecture and design, urban planning, whatever. It is tough to ply your profession in a city that has a reluctance to kind of embrace new ideas. And that's not to say we don't do great things, because we do great things. But, it is, I remember talking to David Penner, another beautiful mind, and he was endlessly annoyed, at the, at like, we could do this, but not here. We couldn't, So is it like, does the architecture design community, do they feel that frustration on a regular basis?
Well, I think that, there's a reason why we are tourists in great cities around the world and metropolises and the things they offer. And I think we just need to, it's a communication issue, I suppose, because Winnipeggers need to be shown that it's possible. Winnipeggers need to believe that these things are possible to bring to Winnipeg and make happen in Winnipeg. And it's not easy, but I think it is possible to show Winnipeggers what Winnipeg could be. And design plays a central role in communicating that and showing what is possible.
Cost estimates suggest that the renovation, just to fix the issues that are within the building structure, $15 to $20 million. So do you think that that is the big barrier? Do you think that's the big obstacle? And that, when we're talking about taxpayer dollars, we're talking about, we're not talking about a small chunk of change here. We're talking about $15 to $20 million. Just to fix some of the major structural issues, never mind the renovation to open it up. Do you think that the money issue will always be kind of that big hump to get over, or will it be something that when there's will, there's a way?
Yeah, that was the thing we heard in the Vote Open campaign a lot, was why would we spend $6 million or whatever it was to open it when we could spend that money on my local community club? And there was endless ideas, and that's natural. I will say it's not going to be 15 to 20 million. That was a pre-pandemic cost. It's going to be 40 to 50 if building construction is any indication of inflation. But the thing about this now is we've flipped it. We're now going to have a completely clean slate, and anything that we add will actually cost us more. And so all of this gymnastics that we're trying to do to make the place better, bring more people back, will actually cost us more. So the argument is actually flipped now. It will be free to let people back to the intersection, and we're going to have to pay to keep them away. So that's a really interesting conversation now, and I think it kind of flips the argument on its head. And I hope people are all the people that were complaining about the money initially are now thinking about, well, was that really the argument I was making, or did I really just care about driving?
Yeah, because for background for listeners who aren't familiar, so the underground mall concourse is failing. And not because of anything extraordinary. It's just reached its...
It's a roof, and it's a roof of a building that's underground.
And it's reached the end of its life cycle. Added to that, the above grade assets, the road deck and the barriers are all failing because they've reached the end of their life, asset life cycle. So it's not optional. The intersection needs to be rehabilitated at grade and below grade. That's work that has to be done. Mm-hmm. It's not going to buy us anything more than a roof that doesn't leak and a road that drives nice. But it does, it does create an opportunity. And one of the opportunities is to kind of say, like, do you really want to spend X amount of money on putting barriers back up? But it's also the possibility, and this is where like design comes in, if that intersection is going to be impaired from a traffic perspective for probably 3 or 4 years.
That's the fascinating part. I think.
So that means like people are going to be avoiding that intersection.
We're going to get a real-time experiment.
They're going to find new preferred.
It's like water.
routes.
They're going to find other ways.
Yeah.
And, you and I exchanged some notes and on Twitter about transit patterns, about, possibly dedicating more of Portage and Main at the intersection, north, south, and west, just to transit. Mm-hmm. David Penner's great idea always was Fort and Gary would become north-south transit corridors like Graham Avenue. I mean, what else could we look at? Once that intersection is really okay. So I'm going to get Adam's finger on the bleep button. It's going to be a show for like 3 to 4 years. Isn't this our big opportunity?
I think so. I think it's a great social experiment to show that. Yeah, I think the big thing will be rerouting traffic, and it will play a key role in revitalizing downtown. I think it could potentially if we do it right.
So again, this kind of brings me back though to the politics of it, which I find to be so. Like, I literally had to go work out last night for twice as long as I normally do to get all the frustration out of my system from the online discussion, but also the emails that I got, and it kind of brings me to an observation made by another reader years ago about the Canadian Museum for Human Rights, and I'm a big fan. I always was a big fan, and when people were discussing the amount of public money that went into the museum, I had a reader write to me and say, blow up the museum, grind the rubble into gravel, and use the gravel to fill potholes. It's too big to fit on a license plate, but I do think that is, or, maybe we should put that on the sign, instead of the welcome to Winnipeg. It could be, there is, oh my God, just after having floated the idea of either a floating donut or a sky deck or whatever, oh my God, so who's going to shovel the snow, right? That was really good.
Was it minus 40 every day?
No, I know. And the other one was, great. Create an elevated platform for people to throw homeless people off into the traffic. And then there was the traffic engineer who said, I don't know if I'm all that comfortable with no barriers for all the drunk people who come out of the bars in the area wandering into traffic, where it's like, oh my God. Yeah. It just, it's enough to make, I do weep a little bit inside because it's no, that's not really what we're talking about here.
Honestly, I don't have the same angst as you. I was totally fine with it, and I'm actually taking this in almost from a step back. Yeah. I think it's funny because I know what's coming, and people who are paying attention know what's coming. Portage and Main is slated to be down along with Union Station, downtown's major rapid transit hub.
Mm-hmm.
It's projected to serve 50,000 people every day when it's built. And it's being fast-tracked. That's the first phase of the rapid transit plan.
The next phase of the rapid.
Yeah. And so if you think you're going to build a rapid transit station for 50,000 people and not let people walk to it, you're dreaming. This all is noise right now. Eventually, and hopefully it's in the next 10 years, that comes to fruition, and it really becomes that transitional place that is the heart of downtown, and is that crossroads and that connection point again, in a way, in transit. So we can argue, Jeff Rawati can argue about whether it's bollards or whatever, or we're going to open it up at 11 p.m. till 1 a.m. just, for whatever reason. We can argue about that. It's all noise, because what's coming down the pipe is a complete transformation of that space into a multimodal hub. And that's what I'm so excited for. And I wish the current council and mayor were fast tracking that. Like, to me, that's the most important thing. Let's stop talking about this and let's get on this rapid transit for downtown, because that's going to be transformational for us.
And further to that, it should be done while the intersection is kind of shut down to traffic.
It would be the perfect time.
Yeah, because at that point, particularly Main Street, but also like Portage Avenue becomes a dead end at the intersection. So, just the same way that traffic patterns in the Exchange District had to change dramatically after all the active transportation was added. Like, you couldn't, jam cars onto McDermott anymore to go to Main Street. Okay, so you know what? Somehow people found a way. So, and again, you're going to go first on this one. So if you could add any one thing to Portage and Main. So we're going to assume that the barriers are coming down and they're not going back up. And we're going to get to cross at grade like normal people living in a modern city. We're going to put our big boy and girl pants on. We're going to cross the road with the signals. But we're going to add to the intersection. We're going to do other things to it to maximize the value. So Niigaan, what's the one thing? It doesn't have to be one thing, but one major thing that you're going to add to the intersection.
Well, one thing I really like is this movement towards sort of even like a libertarian anarchist. It's just going to happen, so everyone better just deal with it. I love that approach, because I think that is the only answer at this point, is to just stop waiting for people to drag their heels and to, rub their palms together and feel nervous about it, and just do it.
So you would see a roundabout in the intersection with a huge sculpture of a hypodermic needle with a line running through it. And then it would become it would become the meeting place for libertarians from all over the world, right? So, am I on the right channel?
I mean, I wasn't endorsing libertarianism, but what I was saying was, this a sort of a put it this way: in just a few short months, maybe years from now, we're going to see one of the corners of that intersection be occupied by the Manitoba Métis Federation, who are renovating a building that is a colonial structure into a hub for Métis culture and history. That, I think, is an indication of where Manitoba and Winnipeg are going. And pretty soon you'll see enough, Cap Young Barracks and also the HBC building. I think there's a radical overhaul happening of the downtown, and it's being led by people, not so much government. And I think that's where this trend is going towards. And this conversation has ended up in a really interesting place, a place in which, in many ways, we're returning to the ways that Winnipeg has always been this place of meeting and of sharing and of community. And I think that the ways in which, what are the needs of the community? And so, if you're asking me what's one thing that I would like, I would say absolutely, just do it. But I also want to see green space. I want to see a commitment to a revitalization of the space. When the marketplace, the market land, were being suggested by different architecture firms, all of them returned to the fact that the former Winnipeg Police Building in the Exchange District covered up a creek, covered up waterways, and the ways people had lived in that area agriculturally. And I think a return to that would be something that I would like to see in Portage and Main. Of course, we can't remove concrete overnight, but I think certainly a revitalization and bring some life to that area, not just people, would be something that I would love to see.
Jaya, what could you wish list add to the intersection to maximize its value?
Yeah, I think green space would definitely be near the top of my list, but it'll be a number of different factors that make it a place that people want to be. I think there's space for people, things that make it a pleasant place for people to be, so that having that traffic and bringing that life to the intersection will do so much for neighboring businesses and organizations and safety and sense of community. It'll have, quite a few benefits that would come out of it.
Okay, so we already know no barriers, Brent, and rapid transit hub. So you're going to have to go beyond that to something more fantastic.
No problem. I definitely think, like you said, the first priority is to make it a great urban place. And it has the population of Steinbach works at Portage and Main every day. It would be the fourth largest city in the province if it was a city. So the energy is there to create something amazing. And if you go stand there, I've done presentations there. I've done other table for 1,200. If you stand on one of those plazas and feel the space, it feels big city. It doesn't feel Winnipeg. If you imagine people and other things, like it has the potential to be an incredible urban place. And to me, that's obviously number one. And to do that organically by having people there. What I would love to add as a sort of a layer is an interpretive layer. Mm-hmm. Because Portage and Main is so important to us. And I remember the first time I went to the Museum of Civilization in Gatineau. You walk in, and there's a huge wall. It's like 10 feet by 10 feet. That is a picture of Portage and Main in 1915 or so, something like that.
In Gatineau.
In like the Maine, Canada's National Museum of Civilization. Yeah. And it's the exhibit it's the wing to talk about cities of the first half of the 21st century. Or the 20th century. And Portage and Main is the Canadian symbol for what a great city could be. And it just blew my mind because it's so the opposite right now. It's a symbol of what a great city isn't. And I've said before, like the history of that place is so rich. And it's not just from when the first grocery store opened or the first hotel opened. It goes thousands of years back. And to tell that story, I think is something that Winnipeggers don't even know why it's special. But to tell it to tourists, to tell it to people just walking by, it has such a rich, layered history, conflict, and there's a lot of not good history that could be told. And we can learn from that. And I would love Portage and Main to be somewhere that we use every day, but we also learn from it. And everybody who comes there learns from it. Why, I'll stop there. The history and telling the story it really tells the story of Canada and our relationship with First Nations. And it's got such an incredible story to tell. I would love to be able to tell that so everyone knows it.
Well, I have several items on my wish list in no particular order. I'm down for the green space for sure. I actually, after having thought about this, and I was in Toronto recently where it's not a huge intersection, but they have the Dundas-Yonge scramble intersection. But the important thing about the scramble intersection is that it was a deliberately added design element to a place where they don't want cars to come. So you can drive on Yonge Street now, but I don't know anybody who lives there who does because it's ridiculous, right? Like it's, you can't make a right or left and turn off Yonge Street because of the pedestrian traffic. And particularly Yonge and Dundas with the Yonge Dundas Square. There's, Ryerson Polytechnic has huge residences. There is retail, just surrounding it. It's not exactly Times Square, but why not? Because you just don't want cars. So, and the unique design of the Portage and Main intersection, you know, I want to be able to walk from the TD building directly across to the MMF. I want to do that. If we're gonna walk on Great, let's walk on it, baby. You
You
know,
should do it now. It's really amazing. Actually, you can do
no,
it.
I know. I have hopped the barriers
It's
at times,
liberating.
but when Brian Bowman was here a couple of weeks ago, he told the story because I interviewed Niigaan and Dan shortly after he jumped the barricades and was almost pancaked
Oh, wow.
by a truck. Brian said there was like 12 feet of rubber laid down when this truck had just like stopped. And then I did an interview with him at the News Cafe where I wasn't talking to him about Portage and Main. At the end of the interview, I said, hey, listen, that's really great. And he goes, isn't there anything else you want to ask me? And I went, okay, I'll bite. What else do I want to ask you about? And he goes, Portage and Main. And then he went on this whole rant, you know, and it literally, that was the seminal moment for me. Like it changed me 180 degrees on the whole issue. So I would do that. And you know what? I do want my donut. I want a
We
suspended
will have a donut on the donut.
pedestrian donut and an inner bike lane so that, you know, people can literally get through what'll still be a pretty busy intersect, but they can get right through the heart of the city on their bikes.
So is it a floating donut or a ground level?
No, it's floating. I want it up in the air.
Okay, cool.
Air rights. I want to take advantage of that. Somebody's going to make a ton of money selling the air rights to that intersection. And and I want, because this is what I want. Like, I want to be able to say when people come to visit me, like, I'm going to take you somewhere where you're going to see something you can't see anywhere else in the world. You're going to get this perspective of this historic asset at intersection. You're going to see the heart of the city from up in the air, and everything looks better up in the air. It just does.
Can I tell you a secret?
Yeah, please.
There's only 3 people listening, you said? Because I've been trying to hide this for the last 10 years. Do you remember there was a competition in 2003 or something up to open, or what the ideas for Portage and Main? I entered.
And?
It was a floating donut.
Ah!
They were up at the Make Cafe on Corden, and somebody spotted it and took a picture. I was like, oh my God, it lives.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we all evolve and we all grow in life, and it was part of my past that I have to live up to.
I think we need to dig up all of those proposals because there were some really great ones.
I think so, yeah. And a picture of whatever your hair looked like back then, too. That would be great.
It was
you
the
know?
same. Just
It was the same, okay.
less gray.
Yeah, no, it's, I think, you know.
If we're talking about weird obsessions with donuts, the European in the room here is saying, why don't you just turn it into a roundabout?
Right.
Yeah.
That's the best way for free-flowing
Can you imagine
traffic
the
anywhere.
confusion, though? Holy
Oh, my
It
God,
would be
yeah.
it would be amazing to watch.
Yeah,
Just
if you-
post yourself at any of the 4 corners and watch the carnage.
Then I want to be on Dan's donut watching the.
Yeah, that's
Oh,
right.
actually,
Looking down on
you can sell
the,
tickets to that.
We will suspend the donut from the 4 buildings so that it's free floating. No pillars.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, you know.
Aren't
Listen.
many figures coming around to the roundabouts? The slow
Oh, good Lord,
implementation of the
no.
handful of them?
I live in a neighborhood that has a major transportation or active transportation route where all the little roundabouts are put in. And I mean, really, like, people in trucks drive over them. Like, it's ridiculous. Nobody has any idea about to put nobody puts their signals on. No, this is, I mean, I'd love to think that one day, you know, because in big cities, like in Nairobi, they have one of the world's largest roundabouts, but they have lights controlling it. Yeah. And so, I mean, there's so many possibilities, right?
They're still proposing, I think, putting a roundabout at Highways 1 and Yellowhead, 16. I know Niigaan was going to jump in. Niigaan, have you ever been hit by anybody at a mini roundabout in Winnipeg, or witnessed anybody going the wrong way round one?
I was just going to say, let the anarchy begin. But then what I was really going to say is, there are ideas throughout the world, but they're often in so-called third world countries where these kinds of solutions are come up with all the time because they simply don't have the funds and the infrastructure to be able to come up with something. So it might just be that we can see countries. I remember when I was in Sri Lanka, there was a 5-way intersection, and it very much became a roundabout with lights. And I think there are many solutions possible for this area, but it takes vision and a bit of risk. And I think certainly there are answers out there.
Okay. One last irony. Like, if there's one thing that people in this city fret more about, it's keeping young people in the city. Now, I can tell you, growing up in Toronto, nobody ever asked me if I was going to stay in Toronto.
Right.
Right? Like, they were sort of like, you're leaving Toronto? That was more like the question I got. But, that having been said, like, if you're really concerned about keeping young people here, why not try to build a city that makes young people excited?
I use that argument all the time. When people ask me why, as somebody who lives in Waverly West, as an example, or Sage Creek, and, I have my house, and why do I care about the urban quality of Winnipeg? Why do I care about downtown? I use that argument all the time. And I say, do you want your children to grow up in the same city that you live in? Like, do you want them to love your city? And they have to be able to have the lifestyle options that we don't give them. They move to Vancouver and Toronto, even Calgary now, because they want that urban connected lifestyle that we just don't offer them. We can still offer the suburban lifestyle, but we need to offer that lifestyle choice that will keep them here. And it's a powerful argument because people can make that connection to their own lives.
So, Jay, you have a 3-year-old.
Yes.
So we've got some time to remold the city in a way that will make your 3-year-old want to stay. We've got some time.
I don't know if it's enough.
Well, it certainly, makes you fight for a better future, knowing that, I'm partly responsible for shaping the world that he's going to grow up in.
The last and greatest gift that I'm going to give all of you is I'm going to invite anybody who's really, really cranked up about what we talked about today. Because let's face it, I didn't invite anybody who wants to keep the intersection closed.
Right.
That was deliberate. And yes, for those of you who are going to write to me and say, you're biased.
No.
Yeah, I'm absolutely biased.
I'm biased too. 100%.
Yeah, no. But, so if you have a comment about the podcast and you're really, cranked up about it, send them to me. Do not send them to my panelists.
You can send them to me. I love it.
Really, honestly.
I've been doing it for years.
No, I know. Well, you're actually a columnist too, right? So you've developed.
I missed the comment section actually.
Yeah, me too. And Twitter, which we're all about to lose soon.
You said the T word.
He said witter, I think it was.
Don't worry, Niigaan, I'll beep that.
Yeah, rhymes with litter. That's right. Niigaan, since you're not with us right now, any closing thoughts? Okay, fine. So
no, I just want to.
Sorry, go ahead.
I just want to say what oftentimes when we talk about Portage and Main, I think people can sort of roll their eyes and feel like, oh, this again. But I think one thing that I've been seeing in this conversation is a real commitment, a new commitment to change and to be able to create something that Winnipeggers can be proud of, but also show Winnipeg's at the forefront of a lot of change. And that change is happening right now after decades and decades, and perhaps less so. And so I just want to say thank you both for coming and joining with us, and I apologize for any of the tech issues that I had coming from this faraway other urban landscape.
Oh, it's a small price to pay, Niigaan, to bask in your reputation and your glory.
Yes, thank you.
Can I throw one last thing in there?
Do.
I brought a quote. Not everyone loves quotes.
But I do. Yeah.
It's Crowhurst and Leonard describing the European Square, and it just felt like this is what Portage and Main could be for us. It would give us a feeling of having arrived at the heart of the city, of needing to go no further, anticipation of social encounter, sensory stimulation, delight, and joy.
Amen.
All righty. So you heard it, Winnipeggers. You're going to get another chance, another big multi-year chance to get Portage and Main right. Don't screw it up this time, okay? I'm talking to you, Broati, up there in the... So incredible thanks to Jaya Beange from Storefront, Manitoba, and my brother in ink, Brent Bellamy from Number 10 Architectural Group, and Niigaan. Who knows, Niigaan? Maybe one day we will cross paths face to face again. I keep my fingers crossed.
Don't be so optimistic.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Thanks to everybody for joining us. Thanks to CJNU Radio for supporting the production of our podcast and saving us from ourselves to a certain extent, and the Winnipeg Free Press for sponsoring this. And thank you to anybody who has the time and inclination to tune in. We will see you again soon.
Niigaan, thanks.